Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Farah, and in today's video we're going to talk about all the books I read in May. So I have 6 books actually to talk to you guys about. I actually finished reading 5 of them. I did start one book, but I stopped reading it because I couldn't get into the audio, but I'll talk about that in a second. So all 6 books were borrowed. So 5 of them I borrowed from my library, and then 1 I borrowed from my brother. I read 2 literary fictions, 1 middle grade fantasy, 1 sci-fi fantasy, and 1 historical fiction. 3 out of these 6 books were audiobooks, 2 were physical books, and 1 was an ebook. So I had a pretty good reading month though, and I was pretty happy with everything that I read for the most part. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about the books. I'm going to start with my least favorite all the way up to my favorite book of the month. So the first book I tried to read was the one I didn't finish, unfortunately, and this one was called Peach Blossom Spring by Melissa Fu. Now, the only reason I stopped reading this was because I couldn't get into the audio narrator. I think the book itself I'm really gonna like, and I'm waiting to see if it comes to my library as a regular book or an ebook, because right now it's only offered as audio, unfortunately. So this book is a historical fiction set in 1938, I think. It spans a long range of years though. So it starts back in the 1930s in China, and then we work our way to the early 2000s in the United States. So we're following kind of this multi-generational family story, and the story begins focusing on this woman named Mei Lin and her son Ren Shu, who are fleeing from their home due to the Japanese army invasion during World War II in their tiny Chinese village. So they're making their way across China, trying to find refuge and safety within all these different areas. And then the story jumps forward at some point, and we're following Ren Shu as he's older and raising his daughter Lily. And then we follow Lily as she becomes older, and sort of her journey and her trying to get her father to talk about his heritage and his past, which he doesn't want to do. So the whole premise of the story sounds really good. It sounds right up my alley. It's just that this particular narrator, I don't know if it was her voice or the way she told the story. I just found it really hard to get into, but I am definitely going to try this book again once I can get my hands and physically read it. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is called Passenger to Frankfurt by Agatha Christie, and this was part of my Agatha Christie reading project. I'm working on reading all of Agatha Christie's books that I can find, and I'm working my way through some of her lower ranked books all the way to the top. So saving the best for last, which is something I like to do when I'm reading. But yeah, so I actually am going to have a separate video on this book because it's going to be part of a series I'm doing. So I'm not going to get too much into the plot. But this book, basically, we're following, it's a spy novel written in 1970. I think she wrote it when she was in her 80s, maybe just turned 80. So anyway, so we're following this man named Sir Stafford Nye. He's a diplomat, and he's returning home from Malaya to London, and his plane gets delayed in Frankfurt. And so during that delay, he's in the airport, and he's approached by this woman who basically asks for his help. She says, I need to borrow your passport. I need to pose as you so that I can leave this country and not get killed. He's so bored with what's going on in his life that he actually agrees to do it. She tells him the plan that she's going to drug his drink. She's going to spike his drink with something to make him really sleepy. And then she's going to steal his passport and his cloak so that he appears to be innocent within the whole thing, so he's not dragged into whatever bad situation she has herself in. So he actually agrees to do it. He wakes up, everything kind of went as planned. The woman is able to escape safely, and he ends up being able to travel home to London regardless. So once he's back in London, he tracks her down, and she kind of recruits him into this spy mission with these other people that she's working with. And he goes on this mission, and we don't really know what it is. We don't really know what's going on. A bunch of other stuff happens that are totally out of the blue, and then it kind of ends abruptly. And I don't even really know what happened, kind of, in a way. So I gave the book 2 stars. That's kind of the general rating I'm seeing most of the time. The book was just a weird book. It had weird, loose narratives. these random, like you're following Sir Stafford Nye and this other woman, and then it like shifts in the middle of the book and it changes to this different plot line altogether, kind of really out there political scheming. And then it kind of then switches back to them and it ends, but I don't really know how it all was connected, and I don't know what was resolved, and I don't really know what happened. So the book itself was really strange, really weird. And for those reasons, I just kind of gave it 2 stars and was like, okay, we'll move on to the next one. And I know that this is not really a true indication of her work as an author. I know there's so many amazing books coming up ahead. So I'm just glad I did it. I am a completionist when it comes to this. So I felt the need to read it, but I don't think you need to read this at all, especially if you don't want to, read a bad book by Agatha Christie. So the next book I wanted to talk about, which I actually have a copy of, is called Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. This book I was working on for a long time. You may have seen it pop up in some of my other vlogs, but this is a book that I was doing a buddy read with my brother on. We're both huge Star Wars fans, and I really wanted to get into reading some of the novels since I love the movies so much. So this book is a sci-fi, part of the Star Wars oeuvre genre, and it takes place about 200 years before The Phantom of the Menace, so way before any of the stories or the characters that we're really used to knowing about. There's one character from present time that does get mentioned, and that's Yoda. But other than that, all the characters are new. They're all new people, lots of different new alien species and things like that. So the general plot of this is that in the beginning, we're following this ship that's traveling through hyperspace. All of a sudden, it gets hit by something, we don't know what, and the ship explodes into all these different pieces. All these separate pieces of shrapnel are now exiting hyperspace at these unforeseen rates and unforeseen times and unforeseen places, and they're on these new collision courses towards different planets or systems or moons where all these people's lives are at stake. So the Republic kind of gets wind of what's happening. The Republic is the main government of this space situation going on right now, and they sort of realize this catastrophic problem going on, and they enlist the help of the Jedi that are working with them, and they together are trying to get these pieces of shrapnel under control before they collide with these different planets and kill all these people. So we are about somewhere in the middle of the book, we're introduced to the actual antagonist or group of antagonists or enemies called the Nihil, and we're sort of learning their motive and what happened and why they're behind all this and what is their motivation. So the main thing that I will say is that the beginning of the book was really confusing for me. I think we're introduced to somewhat like around 20 different characters, and we're following like 5 different storylines that keep rotating. So once you kind of get invested and you figure out what's going on with one storyline, it bounces to another one. So it was really difficult for me to keep track of everybody, to keep track of all the places they were. They were in different places within the space solar system, so I didn't really know what anything was. It was hard for me to visualize that. It was also hard for me to visualize, I'm a very visual person, so it was hard for me to visualize the characters because not a huge amount of description was given. So the storylines were just a bit confusing for me. The second half of the book really picked up though, and I felt that the plot was moving forward more, and I got a lot more into it, and I overall enjoyed the story. There were 2 characters that I really liked their storyline. This was Loden and his Padawan Bell, and I really liked following their story. It was just really engaging, and the action was great. So the story did leave on a really good cliffhanger, and I am going to be picking up the next book in this series, which is called Rising of the Storm. So overall, I gave this about 3.5 stars. Okay, sorry about this, but I had to switch locations. My husband got home from work early because it's a holiday today, and I cannot film with him in the same room because he keeps making me laugh. But anyway, I'm back. So Light of the Jedi, I just got finished telling you. Pretty good. Again, the second half, way better than the first half if you can get through that build-up and storyline and confusingness. But I did think that the villains were really good. I really liked how we saw their perspective and their motivation. And I did like the overall characters towards the end of the book. So looking forward to getting into the second book at some point with that. So the next book that I wanted to talk about is called The Magicians Nephew by C.S. Lewis. And this is the first book chronologically in the Chronicles of Narnia series, and it was my final book reading in the Chronicles of Narnia series. So this book takes place way before the Pensieve children find the wardrobe and go to Narnia. And it follows the story of this boy named Didgery and his friend Polly, who stumble upon his Uncle Andrew, in the secret hidden room in their house. The Uncle Andrew is just, not a good person, and he tricks them into touching these magical rings, which transports them to somewhere we don't know. He doesn't know. He's kind of using them as guinea pigs. He tricks the girl Polly into going first, and then he tricks Didgery into going back after her, saying, you have to go get her and bring her back. Right away, they land in this kind of world between worlds where there's different pools of water that they can jump into and come out into any different world. They don't know what they're going to find. They don't know what pool goes to what world, but they were able to figure out the pool that brings them back home. So they start exploring, and they end up in this really weird, desolate world that looks like a war happened. There's nothing left. There's no people. And Didgery ends up ringing this bell, which sort of brings back this evil witch from somewhere, and she latches onto them, and they accidentally bring her back to London. So she's there, and she's wreaking havoc all over the place. So they end up going back again to the world between worlds, this time dragging the witch and Uncle Andrew and this innocent cab driver with them and his horse. So we're kind of shown, in a sense, the creation of Narnia and how it all came to be. And I really did like this book. It was a little bit slow in the beginning, but I did like the overall story. It had that Narnia feel. It had the magic to it. It had beautiful visualizing language, which helped me really picture what was going on. I mean, there is an obvious Christian theme to this. If you didn't know, C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia has a huge Christian sort of undertone to it. And this did kind of follow that story of creation and the world beginning and all of that. So just letting you know, it did have that if you weren't aware. But overall, I did really like this book a lot, and I'm glad that I saved it for last. I'm glad that The Last Battle wasn't my final book in the Narnia series. And yeah, I would say I probably gave that around 4 stars. I did enjoy it. And I think my overall ranking of this series would be number 1 is still The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Number 2 would be Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Number 3 would be this one, The Magician's Nephew. Number 4 would be The Silver Chair. Number 5 would be Prince Caspian. Number 6 would be The Last Battle. And number 7 would be The Boy and His Horse. Probably 6 and 7 I would interchange. I did do The Horse and His Boy on audio, so I don't know if that made a difference or not. But I just couldn't even follow that book. So I'm really glad to have finished that series. So next I read Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, and I gave this book about 4 stars. It was really good. It's literary fiction, and we're following 3 different points of views. We're following Marcellus, who is a giant Pacific octopus. His story is told by a separate narrator, and it's told in the first person point of view. And then we're following a woman named Tova, who's in her 70s. She's a widow, and she lost her only son when he was about 18 years old. We're following Cameron, or Cam, who is a guy in his 30s, and those 2 are told by the same narrator, and they're told in the third person point of view. So Tova is she's retired. She's a nighttime cleaner at their local aquarium, or she really likes this giant Pacific octopus that they have in one of the tanks called Marcellus. Marcellus likes to escape his tank at night and go and retrieve things, and he kind of collects them in his little tank, and she helps him out of a really difficult situation at one time, and they really bond and they become friends. Cameron is kind of a deadbeat, can't hold a job, can't hold a relationship, has no money, just irresponsible. He originally was abandoned by his mother and raised by his aunt, and he's never sort of gotten over that. He kind of plays a victim, like, poor me. He still carries a lot of hurt with him and abandonment issues, and he finds out that his dad could potentially be this one guy that is really wealthy, and he decides to take a road trip up from where he lives in California to Washington to meet his dad and try to get money off of him. So the place that Cameron ends up traveling is the same place that Tova lives. So eventually they do meet. Tova ends up falling and she hurts her ankle, so Cameron takes over her job at the aquarium. So they both are interacting with this octopus named Marcellus. He discovers a few things about them and he goes to these really great lengths to try to communicate with them and to explain to them something that they are just not getting. So interestingly enough, I did love the character of Marcellus. His narrator was perfect for him. It kind of reminded me of the character of Frasier on the show Frasier, played by Kelsey Grammer. And the narrator for both Cam and Tova was really good as well. Her voice reminded me a lot of Jennifer Morrison from Once Upon a Time. She played the character of Emma. I just thought she did a really good job going from Tova to Cam. She gave Cam a really good sort of whiny, roasty type of attitude. I don't know. Cameron's character was okay. He was kind of hard to swallow. He was a little annoying, but I don't know. I kind of got past that, and I did feel kind of some heartfelt feelings for him. I wanted things to work out for him. Tova was just a precious gem, though. I mean, she really struggled with this problem that I think a lot of older people have when you are the lone survivor of your family and you don't have anyone to help you or take care of you, and you don't want to be a burden, but you know that you probably shouldn't be living alone anymore. So she struggles with what to do for that. She doesn't know if she should join this retirement community, give up her home and her independence, because she really doesn't want to be a burden on anyone. And I thought that was a really good way, that a great theme that was explored within this book. I really loved the relationship between Marcellus and Tova. And the accumulation of that relationship brought tears to my eyes. It was really sweet. And I loved, the story ended on a really good, nice ending. Like everything was closed up really nicely. So overall, I gave the book 4 stars. I think that a lot of people loved this book last year, and there's a lot of 5-star ratings. So if the premise sounds interesting, definitely check it out. I would say the audio is really good just because of Marcellus's narrator. So that was Remarkably Bright Creatures. And then the last book I wanted to tell you about was my favorite book of the month. This was called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book was so good. I really, really liked it a lot, and I'm still thinking about it, and yeah, it was one of my favorite books of the year for sure. So this is another, I would say it's literary fiction as well. It was beautifully written. The language was amazing. The prose was beautiful. Also with Remarkably Bright Creatures, that was beautifully written. And I think that was her debut novel. So phenomenal writing, both of these last 2 books I'm talking about. But for me, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I think the story and the characters and the focus on this friendship style love was really what elevated it. It was really creative. I've never read a book like this quite before. And it's told in the 3rd-person point of view. We have one narrator for our 2 main characters, which are Sam Mazer and Sadie Green. There's a second narrator that pops up in the middle towards the end of the book as well, but I'll go over that in a minute. But we're following Sadie and Sam, and they are childhood friends who met each other in the hospital while Sam was recovering from a car accident that left his foot really severely injured. He had to have tons of surgery on it. He was in and out of the hospital a lot. And Sadie was there because her older sister was battling leukemia. So she was there supporting her sister. They met in the game room and they bonded over their love of video games. They became really good friends, and then through a misunderstanding, they sort of parted ways, but then reconnected in their 20s when they were both attending college. Sadie was at, I think, MIT in Boston, and Sam was at Harvard. And they meet in the subway station just randomly and reconnect, and they decide to start a video game together, to create a video game. So with the help of Sam's roommate named Marks, who was a wonderful character as well. So we're following Sadie, who is an American Jewish woman, and Sam, who is half American, half Korean. And then the 3rd character, Sam's roommate, is, I believe, half Japanese and Korean and American. So we have a lot of talk about racial identity and things like that. But I loved the friendship between these 3 characters, and just all these different themes, the story that what went into building this video game, and all the different ways that they overcame obstacles, how Sadie just persevered in this mainly masculine dominated video game industry. This all takes place in the late 1990s, and they create this amazing game which has huge success. So we kind of see what happens after that and what happens when they try to make the next game, and how Sadie deals with failure and moving forward, how Sam deals with this chronic pain that he has in his foot as a result from this childhood injury, and what made the injury occur, and that emotional pain and the physical pain, and how he deals with that on a daily basis. I think I mentioned this in one of my vlogs. That was a really strong component of the story for me, as having grown up with a parent that had chronic pain that was difficult. And it really just made me think about how people that live in this type of pain all the time, how their perspective of life can be so hard and difficult, and just moving through the day can be such a struggle. So I really loved, there was one chapter in particular where we change points of view and we change audio narrators, and that gave me chills and it brought me to tears. And I thought that was such a creative creative aspect to the story. Now that is the audio version, so I don't know how it would have read if you're just physically reading it, but audio-wise, that worked amazingly well. There was another chapter towards the end that was told in a sort of a different style, and it was really, really interesting, and I loved that. I just loved the relationship between these two people. She really just fleshed these characters out so well. She gave them so much depth and strength, and I loved this book. I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I can't wait to read it again eventually, and I highly recommend it. And I don't think you have to care about or love video games, because I don't at all. It really, to me, the relationships within this story and the beautiful way that, you know, they're so focused on the video games. And I know with younger people in their 20s, you don't think about death. You don't think about your own life and how it can come to an end at any point. That's something you develop as you get older and older. You start realizing the reality of your death and the people of those around you, in contrast to the way things die in video games, where you just hit the reset button and you can start over again. So really just an incredible book. I can see why it won the Goodreads Book of the Year for general fiction. I highly recommend the audio, and that was my favorite book of the month. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this review. I would love to know if you guys have read any of these books and what your thoughts were. I have reading vlogs on all of the books I mentioned, so I'll leave them listed below if you want more of my immediate reaction to the book and what I was feeling at the time, and sort of more chit chat about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you're all doing well and you're having an amazing reading month. It is the middle of June right now, so I'm a little behind as usual, and I've already read some great books for June, so they will be coming in some vlogs soon. But thank you guys for watching, and have a great rest of your day.